Alright, no, in all good conscience, I can't put the original Resident Evil as S tier. Because as much as I love it, it's rough, especially by today's standards. Yeah, the original, the director's cut, and the remake. I don't think the director's cut is on here. So I guess we'll factor the original Resident Evil as including the director's cut content, or the director's cut content. I think I would put this at A, maybe, or maybe B. Alright, so I'll put it at B. The only reason why I'll put it at B is that it didn't particularly age well. Even in comparison to its successor, Resident Evil 2. Because, hold on a second, I actually kind of like... Shit, sorry, this is so rough, and my phone is exploding right now for some reason. Here, I want to make this a little bit bigger so you see more of the tier list. It's just, I have to do it this way, because I don't know of any other way to do it. So, there we go. Yeah, it should be good. Alright, so yeah. I'm gonna put Resident Evil in B because, as legendary as the bad voice acting is, it is bad voice acting at the end of the day. You can't really blame the game for that because it was a PlayStation 1 era game. And voice acting was still very new at the time for video games, so you didn't really have professional video game voice actors. Technically they were because I got paid for it, but you know what I mean. They weren't experienced. A lot of them weren't at the time, so that was still in its infancy. The fact that it laid the groundwork for every single game listed here, so it can't be anywhere below C. It's still a fun game to play. The director's cut added some stuff that was put into the later games that were fixed camera angle, like auto-aim. It added new stuff, has costumes, it has good replayability. Unless you emulate it, it's probably, I think it's a little hard to get working, because I think the PC version at this point is like abandonware, so I think you can find it pretty easily, but I haven't really checked into how hard the PC version is to get running. And people have made mods for it, not so much as they have for the other games, especially Resident Evil 2. But, like I said, I'm putting it at 3 and not any higher because despite all of the great stuff about it and how much I love it, looking at it from a more critical standpoint, it definitely did not age well in terms of gameplay. Because you can't tell unless going into the menu if your character is, like, on the verge of death. The director's cut has some... There's a version of the director's cut that has different music that you can't toggle off, and a lot of it's absolute crap, almost in a hilarious way. So that's why I'm putting it at B. But it would never go any lower than B because it laid the groundwork for what is to come. But I can't really put it in A tier because it's a great game, but it's a tad rough and it did not age well. For the original, it's even worse than that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the actor's just random tourists or something they pulled off the street. I think so. Although I think Jill, the live-action Jill, I think actually lived in Japan though, didn't she? At least that's, I don't know. Very little is actually known about that actress, so. Alright, so for the next entry, Resident Evil 2. Like I said, it's in my top 3 of all time. In fact, it still beats Resident Evil 1 Remake to this day, so that's S tier. Even though it's fixed camera angle and it is only the second game released in the entire series, It improved on the first game in every single way. Love the story. The voice acting was... the voice acting, it's not as good compared to today's standards, but it is 10 times better than the original. It's not laughable. It's campy, but it's but there's a lot of charm to it. The level design in the first game, and that's why that's B and not any lower than that. The level design in the first game is actually pretty good. Level design the second game also improved on the first game in every way possible. I can still go back to Resident Evil 2 and play it and enjoy it. I can for the first game too, but not as much, because the remake of the first game exists. And that's the difference between Resident Evil 2 original and remake. Original, the B scenarios actually matter a lot because there's new rooms in the B scenarios. Mr. X is only in the B scenario. Or Tyrant, however you want to call him. Technically his name is Tyrant, but everybody calls him Mr. X. Some of the bosses are different in the B scenario, so there's a lot of content there. If you got the greatest, I think it's the greatest hits version, had the extreme battle mode, which was okay, but it was still a nice little extra mode. I only played it a few times, but that basically laid the groundwork for the Mercenaries mode in the later games. As much as I loved the first game, and it made me a huge fan of Resident Evil, even though I wasn't really into zombies as a kid. Resident Evil, like, the first time I've ever heard about zombies, I think maybe at one point when I was like 5, I know I saw Michael Jackson's Thriller, I think before Resident Evil, before I played Resident Evil. I think the only time I was ever exposed to zombies before Resident Evil and Thriller was, I think I watched a few minutes of Night of the Living Dead, because I think it was when I was over my grandmom's house and my one uncle was still living there at the time. I think he was in his early 20s or something like that, or late. And I saw them watching Night of the Living Dead. I didn't watch it for very long, though. So that was the only exposure I had to zombies. Resident Evil is technically my real introduction to, like, zombies. And Resident Evil 2 felt a little more traditional because it was in a city, at least for a little bit. And it was hard. I wouldn't necessarily say... Well, I did get kind of scared by it. I was still young at the time when I played it. So, yeah, I think that's everything I need to say about it. It's, Resident Evil 1 got me interested into the series, but Resident Evil 2 kept me interested and kept me as a fan for years to come. So, Resident Evil 3... I didn't like this game as much as until I played it, like... When did I stream it? Like, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe? I ended up playing, like, all 3 of the games. I think I emulated them on PlayStation. I still have all my physical copies of them, of course. But, I think I would put Nemesis in A tier. Again, I didn't like it as much as Resident Evil 2. I like it more now. I thought it was really hard as a kid, and I never beat it as a kid, because Nemesis would always kill me. But I'm better at games in my older years than I was in my younger years, so it's actually not nearly as hard as I thought it was when I was younger. So, so yeah, that's why I would put it at A, but not at S, because it's a really, really good game. I really like Jill Valentine in Aria 1. That was another thing, too. I didn't mention that about the first game, but it solidified it in the third game. And actually RE2 as well, because of Claire Redfield. they contributed to the fact that I really, really like female protagonists in video games, because they were still kind of a rarity at the time. Other than Jill and Claire, we only really had Lara Croft and Samus. So, it's not that they didn't exist, but they were rare, but you always had these badass characters, but I would say probably up until, well, like Heather Mason from Silent Hill 3 was PS2 era. I would say, they felt the most realistic because, like, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, she was, like, traveling all over the world. I'd say she was probably, like, she was near fearless. I don't necessarily say she didn't feel human. It's just, you know, she was like she was the Indiana Jones type. So she wasn't in this, like, realistic setting against extraordinary odds or something like that. And Samus was a bounty hunter in, like, a sci-fi setting. But Jill and Claire, they really made me appreciate and enjoy playing as women in video games, because they were both really badass, especially Jill in RE3. That's why she's, like, my favorite Resident Evil character. She needs to be in more games, Capcom. I like how you treated her character in RE3 remake. We'll get to that. Yeah. Yeah, the whole series, but especially RE2 and RE3, have some of the best female characters in video games in general. And, Jill was excellent in this. They treated her incredibly well. Lots of customization options. It had some really cool, like, the thing that RE3 did really well was, rather than choosing between two different characters, you played as Jill most of the time. You played as Carlos in, like, one part of the game, but it was mostly Jill. So to counteract that, or, like, to add to it so that there's not, like, a dry amount of content, you would have branching paths in the game that would lead to different things and actually could potentially lead to a slightly altered ending. But it altered the story somewhat, which is also really cool. So that's why... And it had the best movement out of the three games. Jill could move around really fast. It had the dodge mechanic, which was kind of tricky to pull off, but... It's still really fun, and it's actually the most comfortable to play. It had the best animations, too. But it was, it's probably still the hardest out of the three, but it's... like I said, when I played it more recently than when I first played it, it felt a lot easier. Yes, I had... Alright, so... To Resident Evil Survivor, yes, I have played Resident Evil Survivor. Its voice acting, it came out, I think... I don't know if it was before or after Resident Evil 3. I'm not the biggest expert on the Resident Evil franchise. Like, speedrunners like Bach Soup probably know way more about it than I do. But, as much as I am a fan of the series. I think I still have... Yeah, I got my brother's copy of, Survivor. I think I would put this... I haven't played this in a very long time. I'm gonna put it in D tier because I didn't really enjoy it when I played it. I never beat it. I've watched people play it and beat it. It seems more fun to watch because it's kind of the voice acting is really, really goofy. I think they had an extremely low budget for this game because it was a side game. It's a first-person shooter. I think it was meant for a light gun, but you can play it without it. It's very, very crusty. It doesn't feel very good to actually play, at least in my opinion. The story is alright. I would say it's the voice acting is not as legendarily bad as RE1 original, but it's still so bad that it's funny. So it's entertaining in that regard. So, I would say it maybe has some redeeming qualities. If I need to, I think I might add another category, like E. Maybe F, I don't know. Let's see. I would say... Okay. May or may not be controversial, but I can't put it any higher than B and probably lower than original. I remember Code Veronica. Code Veronica has a few problems with it. I'll name those first before I name the upsides to it. You can make it impossible for yourself when the game switches to Chris because you don't know that it's going to switch to Chris on the first playthrough. By not putting some weapons in storage. I never really had that problem. I don't remember. I've only played Code Veronica, I think, a couple of times. And I'm not sure if I ever beat it properly. But I know how it plays, I know what the ending is, I know the whole story. This was before, this is actually a Dreamcast game before they ported it to PS2, and it became Code Veronica X. And it was a pretty awesome Dreamcast game. I really wish I would have kept my copy of that. I think I have my copy of the PS2 version still. But there are a lot of redeeming qualities. It brought Claire Redfield back. It brought a new character named Steve into the mix. That he's not as annoying now as how I felt about him when I was younger. I thought he was... I did not like his character at all when I was younger. He's tolerable now. And he has some redeeming qualities to him. Claire was awesome. I love Allison Court returning as the voice actress. Actually, she was Claire, I think, up until Revelations 2, maybe? She always voiced Claire, even in the side games. And the story was really cool. It was weird. It was probably one of the weirder Resident Evils up to that point. Because the Ashfords were, let's say they're very eccentric as the villains, the antagonists of the story. It was probably the hardest Resident Evil of its time as well. There were that's one thing that put me off about it, was that it was particularly difficult. And not only that, there are quite a few spots where you can just instantly get killed that feel kind of cheap. Did bring the Mercenaries mode back from Resident Evil 3, which I forgot to talk about. Resident Evil 3 expanded on the Extreme Battle mode from 2 and named it Mercenaries. It's still not... I think Code Veronica was like closer to RE4's Mercenaries than RE3's Mercenaries. I think I remember that for the most part, because it's mainly just you getting from point A to point B. You don't have to do it. From what I remember, yeah, RE3 Originals Mercenaries, you had to make it from point A to point B, and in the last part, you had to plant bombs. I think they got rid of the bomb portion in Code Veronica. You just had to get to the end within a certain amount of time. RE4 was the one that had the more traditional Mercenaries. But yeah, going back to Code Veronica, it brought back Wesker. There was no hint, as far as I was aware, that Wesker was still alive after the first game. Except maybe at one point you didn't see his body when it should have still been there. Other than that, though, they brought him back, but, and they made him, like, incredibly eccentric. Well, I wouldn't say eccentric. But they made him badass. I actually really liked how they kind of made him a cartoon villain almost, but in a very charming way. And they expanded on it in Code Veronica X. A lot of the whole portion, the whole cutscene of Wesker fighting Chris was added in Code Veronica X. I think they encountered each other, but it didn't last very long, from what I remember. Like, a lot of what the PS2 version of Code Veronica added, ended up making Code Veronica a better game, at least its story, for the most part. Resident Evil Gaiden, I can't say anything about this. I know it has a reputation of being... Oh, no, wait, Gaiden's not the one on the ship, I don't think. Because that's... Or is it? Well, regardless, I never played Gaiden. Yeah, Gaiden's the one on the ship. I was thinking of, like, the, if it has Leon on... Because I think it's Leon and Barry on the boat. Yeah, so I never played that. I know it's notorious for being, like, an absolutely terrible game. And I think someone's trying to remake it. Alright, but I don't know how that's going. I'm sure if there's like a release of like Resident Evil Gaiden that somebody made as like a fan, and they ended up making it into a good game, I'm sure Bakba Super somebody would end up playing it. This is another one. I've seen gameplay of this. This is Resident Evil, in case you can't see it on the actual screen, because it's actually is kind of tiny. Resident Evil Survivor 2. I never played this. I've seen gameplay of it. I also heard that it's pretty bad. It's a rail shooter, unlike, which is more like Umbrella and Darkside Chronicles, less like, Survivor, the original Survivor, which you could freely move around. At least I think so, anyway. I think it was only available in the arcades. If it was available on console, I think it was only in Japan, because as far as I know, it was never available in the States, so I never played it. So I can't really say much about it. I just heard that it's bad, so I'm not sure if I'll ever check it out. Maybe for curiosity's sake, I don't know. Okay, so for this... Yeah, I would, This is like by a hair, too. The second game just holds a special place in my heart. So, I don't think anything can beat the original for me. The original RE2. But Resident Evil Remake is my second favorite remake of all time. The first being, Black Mesa, of course, and that's by a hair. For the longest time, Resident Evil Remake was my favorite remake of all time, and it earned that spot because it basically everything that the first game did, the remake did better. The remake also added stuff that improved on the original story spectacularly. It improved all the characters. It's still really fun to play now, especially with the remaster, so now it's more accessible as well. It was the first one on the GameCube, which I remember at the time I was wondering why the hell they were on the GameCube, because I didn't really understand how the industry worked at the time. Because I always thought, well, wasn't it originally a PlayStation game, so why is it not on the PlayStation? but I didn't realize that they had to deal with Nintendo at the time, so I didn't really think much of it. But again, thankfully, and the game looked way ahead of its time because it was fixed cameras, so they can make the environments look a lot better. The whole technology behind that's kind of neat because they're technically, I think they're JPEG backgrounds, movable backgrounds. Maybe they're GIFs. I don't know, or GIFs, however you want to pronounce it, or PNGs. I don't know, but they weren't static images. Obviously, there was like, well, they were in the original games, kind of. Like, you could tell if they were actually moving, that they were 3D modeled. But, with Resident Evil 1 Remake, that was different. It looked so good. It is almost in line with how games look nowadays. Maybe it looks a tad dated, even with the HD remaster, maybe, but it's, like, barely. With the improvements they made with the HD remaster, it still looks incredibly good. It's fixed camera, but it still plays really well. It still has the auto-aim. The puzzles are good. They're similar, but they're not the same as the original. It's actually a lot of what, like I said, RE4 Remake, I think they actually took a page from what made RE1 Remake really good. And they were maybe still a little more liberal with the 4th remake, but, in comparison to RE1 Remake, but, it's still, RE1 Remake, it's still going to be a hard one to beat. I don't know if they'll ever remake it. There's hints that they might, but I don't know. A lot of people are asking for it. I really don't care one way or the other, because I think RE1 Remake is a near perfect Resident Evil game. And again, it improved on, I was getting less and less scared by horror games, so at the time, I've never really been that scared, maybe more unsettled by horror games, typically. I never got full-on, like, terrified of them, that I couldn't play them. RE1 Remake really didn't, like, I was older when I played it, obviously, so it didn't really do anything, to, like, scare me more, but it was definitely more intense. Lisa was actually very intimidating, Lisa Trevor, the additional enemy that they put in that game. That wasn't in the original. That was actually a really cool, like, extra that they added. And it kind of, like, made it linked to the, to Resident Evil 2 and the G... Like, I think Lisa Trevor was an experiment for the G virus. Like, an early experiment for it. So they were, trying to link, like, the other games to the first game, which is what they've been doing with the remakes as well. The new remakes. Which was really cool. So, yeah. It's only just under Resident Evil 2 for me by a hair because of how much this impacted me. I don't think anything will beat Resident Evil 2 OG. If the remake didn't beat the OG, then nothing will beat it. I don't think. Alright, so Resident Evil 0... I think I would put this above Survivor, but me personally, I put it in D tier. I do not like this game. And that's unfortunate too, because the remaster didn't really make me like it much more. I hate the puzzles in this game. A lot of them rely on the mechanic of you using the two characters at the same time. I think that's incredibly wonky. The hook shot you have to use way too many times in the game. You don't know when you're going to use it when you're first playing it. So you'll have to go all the way back for it. Rebecca can't take a hit. If you use the wrong character for certain segments, you're going to make it like 10 times harder for yourself. It was a neat little experiment, don't get me wrong. I like that they were trying something new. Unless if you played the original and not the remaster, the original had obnoxious loading times. And I don't think I ever actually beat it. Like, when I even streamed the remaster, and I gave up after the one puzzle before the, oh yeah, and they have probably the single worst enemy next to the Novistadors from RE4 that I absolutely despise, and that's the zombie monkeys. Because they're tiny, they're fast, they hurt you, something fierce, and they're really hard to hit. And they're, still, I think, close to the early part of the game, too. So, yeah, I personally do not like Resident Evil 0 at all. It's not worse than Survivor, but, yeah, I did not like it. Dead Aim, I think, is also part of the Survivor series. I did not play this one either. Okay, so Outbreak and Outbreak File 2, they go together. I think I would put them... See, I played this... I never owned these games. I rented them, and then I acquired them to emulate. I'm considering putting them in C tier, but I think I may actually put them below Code Veronica. Because they're incredibly fun co-op games. I used to play this with a group of friends, like Nowhere, Double. I think probably I played it with Awesome Man, probably. I think he had it set up at one point. I have not wanted to set these up again to play online. People have made private servers for it, because obviously the original servers have been shut down because these games are very old. But yeah, people love these games so much that they actually set up private servers for them. It's incredibly difficult to get it set up. It took me, I think, a half hour to 45 minutes to set everything up to be able to play them on the private servers, and I wasn't able to carry that over to my new computer, so I'd have to go through that entire process over again, which I don't really want to do, because it's a giant pain in the ass, and I ran into multiple issues trying to get it to actually run. It emulates pretty well, though. It does emulate pretty well. I'll give it that. It's just the setup to play it online sucks. But outside of that, they ran kind of slow. You kind of needed the hard drive for it. But because it had obnoxious loading times otherwise, it was an incredibly ambitious game. It expanded on the stories of the original games, which I really liked. Added a bunch of extra interesting characters to the mix that we've never seen again, except maybe allusions to them in the other games, like Resident Evil 7. And, when you can actually get this to run and play this with other people, it's actually a lot of fun. Granted, Nowhere would carry me constantly in it, because I can't remember... It's hard to remember all of... because I don't play it constantly, so it's hard to remember a lot of what you're supposed to do. There's always a sense of urgency because your characters are always infected. If you die, you can turn into a zombie and attack your, friends if you want to, so that was like a neat little gimmick. So yeah, the biggest problem with both of the Outbreaks is that they were way ahead of their time. Way ahead of their time. This was when, playing online games on console was still in its infancy. If they were PC games, it would have been probably quite a bit easier to get them running, but they were only consoles, so... and the graphics were actually pretty... They were still pretty good for their time, even though it was fully 3D environments. And it's definitely... It's definitely... If you can get past the ambitious stuff that didn't work very well, it's still a really enjoyable experience. So I can't put them in C tier. I just can't. But because there was a lot of stuff about it that didn't work, I don't think I can put them in A tier either. So I think below Code Veronica and B tier is probably the best. Okay, now Resident Evil 4... This is the controversial part. Because I loved it when I first played it. I didn't like it more than the original games. I don't think I could put this in A tier because over time, for me personally, a lot of the problems with the damage adjustment system, because it was the first time I think that Capcom used it, it ended up getting wonky at times. Professional mode, unless you understand the patterns really well, professional mode is really fucking hard. Sometimes some of the stuff that you encounter in the game can be bullshit. GameCube era. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put it. I'm actually gonna put it above OG RE1 though. But I can't put it in A tier for me. Not for me personally. If it was like my first couple of times ever playing it, I probably would put it in A tier, still below RE3 maybe. Maybe above RE3, but I can't. I just can't. It did not age well for me over time. I think in general it aged well, but I think for me personally, there was just a lot of stuff about it that really annoyed the piss out of me. The Novistadors nearly ruined the whole game for me. They're easier to deal with than RE4 Remake. They're so much better to deal with than RE4 Remake. Still a little annoying, but they did handle them better. I think it's because the game is a little bit slower. Slower paced. But Salazar is also a nightmare in the OG. And there's a lot of things. The QTEs sucked. The QTEs sucked to the point, and it's not just Resident Evil. They sucked in general. Resident Evil was probably the best that QTEs have ever been, and they still sucked. Because I've even talked about that. Like, I can't even finish God of War because I got stuck on a part in God of War. That's why I stopped playing it when I tried it. But the QTEs are fucking obnoxious. I hate them so much. And they are a gameplay mechanic fad that I'm glad has died because I just hated it. I absolutely hated it. And thankfully, after the GameCube version, they made the QTE events trivial because they changed how they work. If you hit a button, I think if you hit a button prior to the QTE coming up, or if you hit the wrong button while they came up, it would always fail you. So you had to have the timing right. But they changed it from the PS2 version onward to where as long as you press the correct button prompt, regardless of if you pressed any other buttons, then you would successfully do the QTE. So it ended up making them trivial. So thankfully, an aspect of the game that I hated has been made trivial, but it still exists, which I'm glad that they didn't do in the remake. They just cut out the QTEs altogether for the most part. Which I like, because I don't think QTEs added anything to the experience. Oh yeah, and I just realized they did kind of take an entire boss fight out of the remake, which I'm glad that they did because I hated that boss. It was the one boss that you fought on this like that you fought on this one platform, I think. I forget what his name is. It's the only boss in the game that would actually survive a rocket blast. I forget his name though. It's this boss that he would walk on all fours very, very ugly looking, had, I think, more than one way of one-shotting you if you weren't careful, like if you didn't hit a QTE in time. And he was just a goddamn tank. And like I said, he's the only boss in the game that can actually survive a rocket blast. And when you understand the fight, he's a little bit easier to deal with. I usually just use a rocket launcher, or I'll just use my Magnum. Everything dies to the Magnum pretty quickly. But yeah, that boss fight, I'm glad is gone. I completely forgot that he actually wasn't in the remake. Hopefully people know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it didn't particularly age well for me over time. Still a great game. I'll still go back and play it. Even now that RE4 Remake exists, I'll probably still go back to play it one of these days. It's got a lot of modding support because of the PC version. It's even got people that are making like their own games out of it too. Well, not like, you know, not like ones you can buy, but like, you know, game mods with like actual gameplay. Like people are making their own levels for it. And then there's the HD Project mod that's really, really well done. They did a phenomenal job with that. So, yeah, still really like OG RE4. Unlike a lot of people, it's not my favorite in the series. But I can't in good conscience put it in A tier. But I think it's probably top B tier for me. Alright, so I own both of these games. I'll actually insert Leon Deathmoon here. Yeah, you hear that a lot. Darkside Chronicles, I'm gonna have to put in did not play yet. I have this, but I just never actually touched it. Umbrella Chronicles, I've never been a fan of rail shooters. Like, they're kind of fun to play in arcades, but I've never really enjoyed them that much at home. Umbrella Chronicles is alright. It's a bit hard at times, and the reason why everyone doesn't particularly like Darkside Chronicles is that the screen shakes a lot, and it's particularly difficult in that regard. Umbrella Chronicles has a very good presentation. I like that it enhances a lot of the stories of the other games. The problem with it is that it sometimes retcons or contradicts stuff from the other games as well. I think Darkside Chronicles kind of does that too. But I think they're still fun to be had with Umbrella Chronicles. It's just that it can't really compare to a lot of the other entries in the series. It being a side game, I can give it some leniency, though. And it was pretty good for a game on the Wii. Utilized, because I'm a little... maybe it's just because I wasn't looking, but I'm a little surprised there weren't more rail shooters on the Wii. There probably were a lot, though. I just didn't have too many games for the Wii. Let's see, how are we on this? Oh, okay. Alright, Resident Evil 5. Personally, I like this game more than most people. I own the 360 version, but I never beat it on the 360. I think I would put this above Code Veronica, personally. Because whenever I've played this, and I played this a few times, I've always played it with a friend. I never played it with the AI. So this is more... this list is more of my personal experience and what I think is good about these. This isn't necessarily taking other people's opinions into account. Hey, Paladin. I like 5 a lot because it's probably one of the most fun co-op games you will ever play. The AI partner is trash, though. The AI partner, if you don't have someone to play with, is absolute trash. They will hog all the ammo. They will use up all of your ammo if you let them. You have to constantly take it away from them. they will get in the way quite a few times, probably more so than Ashley did in RE4, which I didn't even comment on that in RE4. I never thought she was nearly as much of a problem as everybody made her out to be. She can get in the way at times, and it's really annoying, and it was really annoying when she would be in front of you, you're trying to shoot enemies so she doesn't get grabbed, but then she just tries to protect herself, and then she gets grabbed anyway, and then you accidentally shoot her. That's another reason why RE4 can't be any higher than B tier for me. But RE5, like, you're, thankfully, I think you can turn off... I don't know if that was a feature in the original RE5 release. I think you can turn off the ability to shoot your ally. But I'm not sure if that applies to the AI partner, and that might only apply to the person that's playing with you. Ashley was only that way at first. The more and more you would play RE4, that is a good point about RE4 though, and it's a good point about all of the games that came out after it. Most of the games that came out after it, they have a lot of replay value to them because RE4 had Mercenaries. Again, that's why it's B tier and not lower. The Mercenaries was a lot of fun in RE4. Mercenaries was even better in RE5, I think. RE5, I think, was built on top of RE4 because it felt very much... The engine felt very similar. And, like, the animations actually felt similar at times, too. But yeah, that's another thing man, I'm lousy at this sometimes. RE4 had, the Mercenaries mode. I didn't talk about that. And it added, like, some nice replay value to it. It was a lot of fun. You could choose between Leon, Ada, Krauser, and Wesker. You also had 4 levels that you could choose from, one of which was not based on any of the levels in the game. It was Waterworld for some reason. It was hard, but it was great. It was chaotic. 5 added to that. All of the levels, I think, in for 5's Mercenaries mode were based on levels in the game. You had pre-loadouts in both of them. You even had different costumes in RE5 where they would have different loadouts. They even added to it when they made the Gold Edition with Mercenaries Reunion. I don't know why, but they're still separated even like now. They didn't combine the 2 Mercenaries modes. I don't really know why, but oh well. RE4 and 2 are my S tiers. I could see it. I understand why people love RE4 so much. For a lot of people, RE4 was their first Resident Evil. I'm a little unique in that regard. There's a lot of people that love RE4, but there's a lot of people that hate RE4 because of what it turned the series into. I'm one of the few people that's very mid about it. I really like the game. I'll still play it every so often, but it did not age well for me. So I feel like I'm an exception to that. And RE5, probably the most fun co-op game you'll ever play next to Left 4 Dead. So I have a better impression of RE5 than most people because I had someone to play it with. Same goes for Resident Evil 6, and we'll get to that in a second. Mercenaries 3D, I really wish I could have played this game. I never had a DS, so I can't rank that at all, because I never played it. Revelations. This is a hard one. I think... Yeah, the cheesiness was, I would agree, for both 4 and 5 was very, that added to the character of the game. Especially Wesker in RE5. I love Wesker in RE5. I know a lot of people hate him, but, I love him. I think Revelations, I'd put bottom B. I like this game. I didn't play it when it was on the DS. I played the HD version on PC. I actually like this game. It's a little rough. Your AI partner is absolutely meaningless. He's there only for story. They don't have a life bar. You never really have to worry about them. But they just kind of exist. They don't help you at all. Literally, when they shoot, they take away 1 damage. Doesn't matter what weapon they use. I think they only ever use a pistol, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that DC Douglas... DC Douglas didn't return with his role as Wesker. I'm sorry, there's going to be spoilers for Resident Evil 4 Remake if you haven't played it yet. Because I just beat it. That's why I'm doing this tier list. Yeah, the whole thing with DC Douglas, I won't get too into it, but he pissed off Capcom because he leaked Resident Evil 4 Remake stuff. Which is a big no-no, especially if you broke NDA. So, before they would have hired him back for his role in RE4 Remake, I think they probably were gonna hire him back because he had stuff on it. Also, I think he's involved in some scandals too, but I never really read too into that. So, I wasn't gonna buy Remake. I would encourage you to still buy the Remake. I think it's worth the amount of money. I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it more than RE4 Original, but we'll get to that because it's the last thing on this list. Operation Raccoon City, I think this is. I haven't played it yet. I know it's kind of trash. But I can't give a definitive answer on that. You can get the PC version of Operation Raccoon City to work, but I hear it takes a lot to even get to that point. So otherwise, you're buying a game that literally, you're throwing money away, practically, if you buy Operation Raccoon City. Although I think you can, it goes on sale a lot, I think you could probably pick it up for $1. I really liked Operation Raccoon City. Some people actually do seem to like it. I think it would probably be a mediocre third-person shooter game if it didn't have the Resident Evil title to it. And it did some like wacky things with the story. It's basically a what if this happened and these people were here for some reason? Would this change things in like the original games? But yeah, I can't comment too much on Operation Raccoon City because I just haven't played it, so... Actually, you know what, I'll skip a little bit. I can't really say anything about Umbrella Corps either because I had no interest in this game at all. It just kind of showed up, and I saw it, and I was like, do I really want to spend money on this? I don't think so. And it was probably good that I did, because everybody seems to hate this one in particular. Alright, so Resident Evil 6. I have only played Resident Evil 6, I think, twice. And I think both times it was with my buddy Nowhere. Or did I play it with Awesome? I know I played this game twice, and I know I played it at least once with Nowhere, but I'm not sure if I did it both times with him. I personally like Resident Evil 6 as a co-op game. It is not better than 5 as a co-op game, because it does some really weird stuff. I think I'd put it behind Revelations, but still in B tier. And that's mainly because the story is garbage. There's still a charm to the story. It's so wacky, so... Probably the best way I could describe the story for Resident Evil 6 is anime horror. Anime action hard. Because that's what it felt like. It felt like an anime a lot of the times. And that's not... I'm not using that to insult it. It doesn't really feel fitting for the Resident Evil series to be anime, though. I use it as more of a term of it being unfitting for the tone. The Mercenaries mode is pretty good in it, though. Some of the other extra modes that they experimented with, like Onslaught and stuff like that, were actually pretty fun when I played it with my friends. I can't hate Resident Evil 6 completely. It's not a good entry in the series as a Resident Evil game, but it's still a fun co-op shooter. The AI screws you over less, at least in terms of ammo, because if you use an AI partner, they don't use up your ammo. They just have infinite ammo on all of their weapons. I think they can still get in the way at times. I think turning off friendly fire also affects the AI, but I know that they have a toggle for that, and it's actually pretty fun to toggle that off. To turn friendly fire on. It doesn't hurt your ally, but it does like stun them or like shove them. From what I remember. And that's like, it's actually hilarious. And the game can be, because the game is so ridiculous, it can be fun at times. That being said, there are a lot of really, really frustrating segments in Resident Evil 6. Even when you're playing with a friend. And even when your friend knows more about the game than you do and knows how to handle things, you still get screwed over by the game sometimes. Because it's still a little janky at times. Yeah, and that was actually pretty cool, like the end to Chris's campaign. Like, Chris's campaign is probably my least favorite, but it does have one of the better last chapters. I would say Sherry's and Jake's last chapter is worse than Chris and Pierre's. Also, I didn't really care much about Pierre's. I don't think he was a bad character, I just didn't care that much for him. I kind of liked the idea of Wesker having a son, even though it's kind of hokey. And it is kind of hilarious that the co-op feature for Ada's campaign is an afterthought. Like, Agent just kind of exists. But yeah, that part at the end with Pierre's, that did kind of salvaged that campaign somewhat, because that part was actually kind of fun. Really hard, but fun. Well, kind of hard. I don't know if Nowhere and I died on it when we played it. Wesker yeah, that was kind of like an anime storyline. That was part of the reason why it felt like a very anime story. Okay, so Revelations 2. I feel very bad about this. I didn't particularly enjoy this game that much when I played this. I feel like I should go back and play it again, and I'll probably like it more. But I'm putting it in C tier. I enjoyed Revelations 1 more than 2. I really enjoyed the raid mode in Revelations 2, though. I actually put a lot of time into that. I didn't like this that much because it felt very janky. I feel like Moira got in the way a lot. She also didn't use a gun, so that kind of hindered things even more. But that being said, I think around the time that I was playing it, I might have been going through some shit or something like that, or maybe I was just in a bad mood generally. I feel like I lost my patience a lot on the game when I don't think it really deserved it. So at some point I might go back and play it again. But I thought it was just barely above being playable for me. Revelations 2, it was Claire, and yeah, Revelations 2 was Claire, and then it was Barry's daughter, oldest daughter, I think, Moira. But the story for it wasn't bad. I think I would enjoy it more now. I think I would find it more charming now than when I first played it. I thought it was incredibly corny and a little too on the nose when I first played it about some of the references that it was making to the other games. Like, it almost felt like it was bashing you in the face with it. But maybe I was being overly critical. I don't know. But, yeah, that's my feelings on Revelations 2. Incredibly fun raid mode, which, the mercenaries modes in, the mercenary mode in, Village is kind of like a combination of original mercenaries mode and raid mode from the Revelations games, but yeah, that's why it's C tier and not lower, to be honest, because the raid mode kind of saved it. So Resident Evil 7... I think... I'm not sure. I really like 7. I like Village more than 7. I think 7 I would put in A tier. Because I really like that it brought the series back to its roots. The segment with the Baker estate was awesome. I liked all the characters. I liked that it was making references to movies like Evil Dead and things like that. But that being said, the guns in it were really cool too. The fact that it was first person was a nice little change. Story was rough at times, but it was still a net positive, I think. The DLC was really good too, or at least the DLC that I played, which was just the two main ones, Not a Hero and End of Zoe. I heard a lot of people like some of the stuff from the other DLC though, like enjoyable little extra modes. What else? Second part of the game, though, after the Baker estate and after the Jack fight. After the mutated Jack fight, that's when things went downhill. The ship segment was... It was tense the first time I played it. It got boring on subsequent playthroughs. The ship segment was not well thought out. I understand. I can understand why it turned out the way it did. Yeah, I can understand why the ship segment was the way it was, as well as the mines. They basically, when they were making RE7, I think it was one of those instances where they scrapped the entire idea and started from scratch. So they kind of they ended up getting rushed. The demo for Resident Evil 7 was what hyped everyone up for it. The demo for 7 was legendary. It came just after the PT demo for Kojima's, which PT wasn't going to be Silent Hills, but it was kind of like a teaser for what would be Silent Hills. And that was after all of that mess from that happened. And the 7 demo happened specifically because PT happened. It was directly inspired by it. It was really cool to watch. It was really cool to eventually play and figure out the puzzle. You didn't really know at the time what they were going to go for with the actual game. And so that whole experience is great. 7 would almost go into B tier because of the second half of the game, but I really can't put it there just because of what it did for the rest of the series after that point. I still really liked Ethan. I still like Mia. really like Zoe. A lot of people I know really hate Mia. I still kind of like her as a character. I don't know. I think she's alright, but she's definitely the weaker out of the 3 new ones that they introduced. The 3 main characters, anyway. The antagonists were all really good. Jack Baker was probably one of the best antagonists. Well, one of the best enemies. I wouldn't necessarily call him an antagonist, because he wasn't willfully antagonizing you. The whole idea behind the mold and the Mutamycete, it was kind of neat because the series went from like virus to parasite, and then 7 brought in the idea of a fungus or a mold. Mold is a fungus. Being like the bioweapon in the game. And yeah, the DLC for it was pretty cool, though. I liked Not a Hero, and it was really cool that that was free. End of Zoe. You play Joe Baker, which is Jack Baker's brother. That's a lot of fun to run through because Joe likes to punch things. He'd probably love to punch a boulder, too, if you let him. It was, End of Zoe was kind of campy at the same time because of that fact. But, it was still pretty cool. Oh yeah, and I'm like jumping all over the place, I'm sorry, but yeah, like I said, main story, not just the ship, but the mine segment was also rushed. It was basically just an enemy rush. And the molded, that's another problem with 7, was that the molded were not very good common enemies. They were very, very basic, and there was only 3 versions of them in the main game. They added a few more in the DLC, and they added crocodiles in End of Zoe, but yeah, the best enemies in the game in 7 were the bosses, not necessarily the molded. Thankfully, the molded didn't really return. Yeah, they didn't return in Village. They're completely different in Village, even though it's still mold. Well, instead of the Mutamycete, it's a Megamycete, but it's, you know, same difference. Okay, so Resident Evil 2 Remake. S tier. Not better than 1 Remake, in my opinion. Not better than the OG. But still really, really good, and a very, very well done remake. Still had a lot of charm to it. I like the direction that they took with the characters. I like the direction that they took with the story. Did anything come of that PT demo? The only thing that came of it is that Kojima got so pissed off at Konami that he left. And he left to make Death Stranding. That's what came of the PT demo. Death Stranding happened. Which I haven't played, so I can't form an opinion on it. I'm not sure if I'll ever play it, because I'm not sure if I'm going to be interested in playing it or not. But anyway, back to RE2 Remake. It showed that the RE engine could do third person really well. Because I think it was the first time that they did it. Yeah, it was the first time that they did a Resident Evil in third person in their in-house engine. I liked how they were treating Leon and Claire. I like the new voice actors. Especially Claire's voice. Claire's voice actor is, like, cute as hell. I love her. But I hope they make Code Veronica just so they bring her back. But yeah, they treated both of the characters really well. The updates that they made to the zombies felt really fun to fight. They still felt like a threat. The police station, like, a lot of what made the OG feel really cool was enhanced in RE2 Remake. The reason why it's not better than the original The B scenarios, they screwed up with the B scenarios. They were originally not going to have them. They decided at the last minute, as far as I'm aware, to add the B scenarios. But the B scenarios barely changed anything, unlike in the original, where you would go to certain sections that you couldn't access in the A scenario. It didn't change the story at all, which, you know, I could understand a little bit to keep it so people don't get confused about what's canon and what isn't. I can understand it in that regard, but it still would have been better if the B scenarios changed more than they did. And, the final Birkin segment on the train didn't feel as epic as it did in the original. It's just mainly because nothing else about the B scenario changed, so... but overall, like, the puzzles were still really good. There was familiarity with, like, the police station, the sewers. A lot of the level design was even better. It's memorable. I actually like, even though the OG soundtrack is much more memorable, because they had very specific tracks for certain sections, I do like the direction that they took with the remakes. Not so much RE3 remake, because it's very forgettable, but, like, RE2 remake and RE4 remake, everything feels a lot more ambient. And I tend to like that, because, you know, like me with the Doom series, I actually like PlayStation Doom and Doom 64. I like Aubrey Hodge's approach to the sound effects and music over the OG stuff in the classic Doom series. Because I thought that the more horror aspect of it kind of fits Doom a little bit better to me personally, even though I really like the new Doom games. I kind of wish they would have went that route, but that's beside the point. I really like Doom 3, but anyway, yeah. Resident Evil 2 Remake was almost there to be perfect, but doesn't quite hit the same notes that RE1 Remake did with the original Resident Evil, which is unfortunate. Resistance, I actually did play this. Very little. I actually think, yeah, you know what? Let's make a new category for this. And you know what? We'll completely skip over E. We will do F tier. Wait, what? No. Delete this row. No, 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 no. Wait, 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 wait. God, this website is so weird sometimes. Alright, so new. This is F. There. Okay, so I don't even know. Oh, yeah, that's why. Alright. Yeah, this was supposed to be first. I'm making a new tier for this. Resistance is F tier. I don't even know what they were trying to accomplish with this. It seemed like a very half-assed competitor, but not really competitor, to Dead by Daylight, because it's 4v1, but it's not like a killer that's physically on stage going after 4 survivors. It was more like, I guess, not tower defense. It's more like a Zombie Master type game. I don't know if anyone remembers that. That's the closest thing I have to compare it to, but it's a mastermind that puts stuff on the level to stop 4 survivors from escaping. And there was fun at times, but at the same time it got really annoying, so I lost interest really fast. And then it died a pretty horrible death because I don't think the servers are shut down yet, because I think people still play it. very little people, but there's people that still play it. It had weird I think it had weird monetization. I'm not really sure what its monetization was. It added, and then, like, I thought it was just going to be its own thing, but then it added some of the characters from RE2 and RE3 Remake. It added Jill, Claire, Leon. I don't know if it added Chris. I don't think it did. So, like, it just, I didn't know what they wanted to do with it. It wasn't really that fun to me. It felt very basic, and they abandoned it pretty quickly. So, yeah, Resistance is just, it's worse than Survivor, in my opinion. It could have been something. Maybe if they put a little more effort into it. I don't know why they even tried. And you know what? I played Reverse exactly once, and I never want to play it again. That goes with Resistance. In F tier. It is a free-for-all / team deathmatch type game that's not really that fun. It is very, very basic. And it has weird-ass rules with it. And I don't know. It's just, it's not even remotely fun. This has even less effort put into it than Resistance. And that's an accomplishment, almost. I don't know what, but it's an accomplishment. Alright, Resident Evil 3 Remake. I would put this above Resident Evil 0 because I could actually tolerate beating it, but, I don't know if I want to keep it in D tier. Maybe it should be C tier. Because it's not a terrible game. It's incredibly linear, incredibly underwhelming in comparison to, the thing that it's remaking. Because unlike Resident Evil 3, where you had branching paths, different outcomes because you took those paths, Nemesis wasn't scripted the whole time. But it was still using the RE engine. It was still building off of what Resident Evil 2 Remake established in terms of gameplay. Yeah, I think I would actually put this in C tier. It's not a bad game. It is incredibly average, though. And I think I still had more fun with Umbrella Chronicles. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I would put it above Umbrella Chronicles. Yeah, I think I would put it above Umbrella Chronicles, because I'm just not... I'm not that big of a fan of rail shooters, so... So yeah, I think I still had more fun with that than I did with Umbrella Chronicles. I think I still don't like it as much as Revelations 2 because of Revelations 2's raid mode. Resident Evil 3 had very cheap replay value to it because all it had were unlockables. You could get infinite ammo very easily in the rocket launcher. But I never felt like I wanted to get the extra stuff in 3 because literally it's the same thing start to finish. The only replay value is really the difficulties and the unlockables. Resident Evil 2 Remake had extra game modes. I didn't even talk about that with Resident Evil 2 Remake, and that's why it's also so good. Because it still brought Hunk back. Hunk in Resident Evil 2 Remake is better than in the original. Because it's way more interesting. It's more of like a rush to the end as opposed to... Well, it was a rush to the end in the original as well, but it felt more so. I like how they treated the Hunk character. He, oddly enough, had more character in Resident Evil 2 Remake, and it's hard to do that. But then it also had, I think it was called, like, Ghost Survivors, which were, like, mini what-if scenarios of what if these characters actually lived. And those were, like, nice little game modes, so Resident Evil 2 Remake had a lot of replay value to it because of that, because it had extra game modes, its unlockables were pretty good, too. And it stayed in the spirit of the original. Resident Evil 3 Remake did not stay in the spirit of the original, in my opinion. It was incredibly linear. I liked the design of Nemesis. I like how they treated the characters, though. Those were the redeeming qualities of it. the gameplay itself was fine. The basic gameplay of it was very similar to RE2 Remake. It felt good to fire all the guns. It felt good dodging zombies. The dodge mechanic was easier to use than in the original. Nemesis, when he was actually chasing you, was fun. That being said, it removed, for some reason, like, there was no, like, shooting off of it. There was no decapitation kills. Like, there was no you shooting the head and their head explodes. There was no shooting their legs off. The zombies. The game felt very rushed. And like I said, unlike Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 Remake was very linear. There's really nothing else that you can do. I heard that the harder difficulties are really fucking brutal. To the point where they're not very fun. But that being said, I don't think I would get frustrated by it more if I, like, replayed it. It's just, I don't really feel compelled to go back and play it again. It was very, very average. It wasn't a bad... It was a lazy, mediocre game. It was not a bad game. So that's why I think probably C is the best spot for it. And like I said, the raid mode alone for Revelations 2, even though I didn't really like the main game that much, still beats Resident Evil 3 for me. Because I spent so much time on that. So that's why I think that's probably the best spot for it. The last two are in S tier, easily. I think I actually like Village. Do I like Village more than Remake? I think I still like... I don't know, because I played through this twice, but I also played through this twice. I would almost say that these are, like, on equal terms, third for me. I think maybe this has a slight edge because it was still a... It's a remake to one of my favorite games on time, and it's actually a really well done remake. Actually, no, you know what? I would probably put Resident Evil 4 Remake above Village. Probably. I don't know, it's so hard. It's so hard to say. But I'll talk about Village. I'll talk about why I liked Village so much. It didn't feel, unlike Resident Evil 7, it's like a direct sequel to 7 in that it involves Ethan Winters, Capcom isn't the best with, like, telling the story of, because they've done it multiple times, and you always know that, in the end, they're actually the hero. They always try to pull this, oh, the hero is the villain now, or so you think. They're actually the hero, it's just they have to do these different things or whatever. And they tried to do that with Chris, but you already kind of knew that Chris was really not a villain in the game, even though they were kind of trying to make him out to be. But the story was still really, really well done. Ethan was given a lot more character than he had in 7, even though for some reason they just, when they made it, the game was still all in first person, like even Chris's segment, until the DLC came out, and then they allowed you to play it in third person, which I thought was a nice little bonus, but didn't really add much to the game. I'd probably still play it in third person, though. But that being said, they brought back a lot of elements from, like, Resident Evil 4, which almost made it obvious that they were going to remake 4, because They had the merchant, you could buy different weapons, you can upgrade your weapons. A lot of the stuff that you couldn't do in 7, you did in Village. Instead of the molded, which were kind of boring, you had werewolves as the common enemies. You had zombies, but they weren't like T-Virus zombies. They were reanimated from the Megamycete. So they felt like more traditional. Video paused. Okay, we'll just leave this one on. I guess that video just ended. Where was I? Oh yeah, they added more to the Megamycete story. Mother Miranda was a very intimidating enemy. The game had a shit ton of character to it. And, like, it's funny that they hyped up Lady Dimitrescu so much. Like, she was good for marketing, but she really was not in the game at all. She was, like, the first antagonist that you fought. Pretty much. She was the first real boss in the whole game. And, she was a great fight. But there was so much more to that game. But Heisenberg was a really cool antagonist too. Probably one of the downsides to the game is not necessarily the Beneviento part with the house, with the horror house, and the disturbing baby. That part was fun the first time through. Second time through, you're just kind of going through the motions, and it's all right. But it's probably a part that's gonna get kind of boring the more and more you play through that game. But thankfully, it's not a very long part, so it won't drag on too much, I don't think. Which, funny enough, I think they corrected in RE4 Remake with the Ashley segment, but we'll get to that. But yeah, what else? Mercenaries mode on initial release was a nice extra game mode, but it was kind of lazily done. You could only play as Ethan, and it felt like a combination of Mercenaries and Raid mode from Revelations 2. And there wasn't really much that you could unlock with it. But they fleshed it out more when they released the Shadows of Rose DLC, which I still haven't played yet, but I heard it's still pretty good. So I'll have to play that eventually. I bought it and I didn't play it, but I played through the entire game again in third person, which that's what the DLC added. Which was a lot of fun. I actually thought it was a little more fun on the second playthrough than it was on the first playthrough. Just because, like, I felt like a powerhouse that time, so it was almost like a power fantasy. In a way, because all my guns were already upgraded. The Mercenaries mode was more fleshed out with the DLC. You can now play as 4 characters. Playing as the other characters is easier than playing as Ethan. Ethan's actually kind of hard mode. You had Chris, like, all the other 3 characters that they added all had special powers. I didn't unlock Dimitrescu. She's one of the unlockable characters, but she's the last one you unlock. I didn't unlock her, but I played through almost every level as Chris and almost every level as Heisenberg. Heisenberg's actually a lot of fun to play as, too. I think he's about as tall as Ethan is. He almost feels a little shorter, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it was cool that the DLC fleshed it out a little bit more. Resident Evil 4 Remake, we're getting the Mercenaries on the 7th. I'm still not sure if I'm going to stream that. I might, because I had fun streaming RE4 Remake. And, yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I needed to say about Village. I would definitely go back and play it again. It was a lot of fun. I like the fact that they explored vampires and werewolves. Yeah, the Dimitrescu sisters were technically vampires. I mean, they're all affected by the Mega Mice seat, but, like, they're all connected. Oh yeah, and before I get to Resident Evil 4, the ending to, the story was really good in Village, like, building on 7 and adding to it and doing a phenomenal job. And the boss fights, I didn't mention that the boss fights were also really fun. Heisenberg can be kind of a pain in the ass. Not as bad as Salazar, and not as bad as Salazar from RE4 Remake, though. And Mother Miranda is actually pretty tough, too. I remember. But they're all pretty easy to understand. And they're all really fun to play as, or to fight against. And the ending actually made me choke up. The ending was actually pretty cool. It was a proper ending to Ethan Winter's story. Chris was still really good in it. I thought he actually had a lot of character, and he didn't have much character in 7, to be honest, even though I like Not a Hero. But he had much more character, I think, in Village. And his segment was really cool to play in. And yeah, the ending was very, very, very satisfying. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so 4 Remake. Honestly, I think all 3 of these I almost like relatively equal. Maybe a slight edge to RE2 Remake. Just, again, because it's a remake of my favorite Resident Evil game in the entire series that did it mostly right. This is a very, very well done remake to a game that I really like but isn't my favorite. So I think that's why this still has an edge over this. But that being said, this was a blast to play through. Loved 90% of it. The Salazar fight was frustrating. I think I got unlucky with the Sadler fight. I got unlucky with the Sadler fight because he jumped, broke part of the stage, and I think I was just unfortunate enough to be right on the, platform that he broke. But they gave me no opportunity to dodge that, so that felt kind of bullshit. Salazar also felt kind of bullshit because of his pus pods that he randomly spawns on the ground near the end of his fight. It was unfortunate that one of them spawned practically right on top of me. I got stunned, and then he did his one-shot move and killed me, which was bullshit because there was nothing I could do about it. Outside of that, everything about the original that I didn't like, practically everything, was improved upon in the remake. The characters were really good in 4, but they were even better in the remake. I liked everyone's voice actor except for Ada's voice actress. I still feel terrible that she got harassed off of Instagram. I hate it when people do that. We don't know the story behind why she was given the part. It might have been a last-minute thing. I see some signs that might have been the case. I don't know. I don't really know why. We don't really know the story behind it. I don't necessarily fault her for doing a bad job. Like I said, there might be a story behind it. It's unfortunate that the performance just did not feel very good. But like that being said, I hope she's maybe doing better. Probably shutting down her Instagram was a good idea, and just not reading any more of the vitriol she was getting, which was undeserved. Just because she maybe didn't do a stellar job with voicing Ada doesn't mean that she's 100% at fault. You don't know the whole story, so why are you giving her shit for that? Now, if she was acting arrogant as shit, I wouldn't have any sympathy, but she wasn't. As far as I'm aware, she was excited for the role. She liked that she got it. She was apparently the live-action actress from Welcome to Raccoon City, which was an awful movie. But I think that was the movie, right? Because I watched that movie that they released. I didn't watch the CG 4-episode miniseries that I think that they made, but that wasn't them. It was the live action movie. That's right. So I watched that one and it was not good. Yeah, there's circumstances. There's like theories about why she was brought into the role. Some theories about maybe it was rushed or something like that, and she didn't have enough time to practice her lines. It's all speculation at this point, but like I said, ultimately she didn't do the best job. That may have not been her fault. That could have been the directors. But even then, like, even if you were just bad at your job, you don't deserve harassment for that. Criticism maybe, but not full-on harassment. Like, come on, guys. But aside from that, like, all the characters were still treated very well. Leon, I really like the direction they took Leon. He felt familiar, yet at the same time still fresh. I like his voice act. It's the same voice actor from RE2 remake. I liked his approach. It was really cool to hear that Paul Mercier, the original voice actor, coached him for the role in a remake, which was really nice. It's actually kind of cute to hear that. I like it when you hear about people that are helping each other out because they're just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. That's like something that they don't have to do, but they did it anyway because they're being nice. Like that's always good. You know, it's always good to be nice. I love how they treated Ashley. I think I didn't hate her in the original, but she's 10 times better in the remake. Luis was awesome in the original, incredibly awesome in the remake. I love how they treated Luis. I think I like how they treated him the most. Krauser's still kind of a dork, but I still really like how they approached his character. He actually dies a more honorable death in the remake than he did in the original. Leon was just kind of like, "Pfeh, whatever." In the original, in the remake, it seemed like he would actually, because that was his superior officer. So his death actually felt like more of an impact on Leon. And it's nice that we're getting hints that they are actually gonna put the Separate Ways DLC in, so that's gonna enhance the experience even more. Mercenaries is coming on the 7th, so that'll add to it even more. If Mercenaries ends up being really good and Separate Ways ends up being good, it might actually beat RE2 Remake, I don't know, for me. So that might actually get pushed up on the list. But it could also get pushed down on the list because it may end up not aging well, who knows, but from the first playthrough, it was great. I loved it. It's nice that I got to do this. I gotta wrap this up soon because it's getting close to 9 o'clock. That's usually when I end. But it was nice to do this little tier list. I was almost gonna do something else entirely, but I figured why not. People like the Boomer Shooter tier list that I did, so I figured why not do this as like a last minute thing. But I also did this because Resident Evil in particular has been a series that has been close to my heart ever since I played the first game when I was like, I think 10 or 11. So I grew up with the series, even though I probably shouldn't have been playing it. My parents are always good about letting us know that these were just games and that they're not real and that don't emulate this shit in real life. So they were really good about that. So they didn't mind that I played stuff like this. But yeah, that being said, I'm glad that the Resident Evil series is in a good place again. It had a dark period. At times, but for the most part, I really like the, where the series is at. I like that it continues to thrive. Always enjoyed the series. Community can be a little hectic at times, but I guess that's true for everybody. Or for every, community surrounding the games. And, I know that I personally have a few spicy takes, like with, RE4 original. And, even RE6. I'm sure people probably put this in F along with these two. But, and I'm sure there's probably people who love Resident Evil 0 that's like, hey, what the hell, why are you putting it so low? And, or probably saying, oh, why is this not an F tier? Why is this not S? This is like the best thing of all time. But you know, differences of opinion and all that. But I wouldn't be doing a tier list like this if I didn't enjoy the series. And I really love Resident Evil, and even though I don't center my stream around it most of the time, I still love streaming it and I still enjoy it. And, I just hope things are, still good for it in the future. Looking forward to Resident Evil 9, which is pretty much confirmed, I think, at this point, that they're working on it. There's hints that they're gonna do an RE5 remake. Because I swear Sadler used Ouroboros, or a primitive version of Ouroboros at the very end of, the game. Well, like the cutscene right before you actually fight him as a boss. So, maybe they're hinting that they might be remaking RE5, I don't know. They probably will, because it'll probably make them a lot of money. So, we'll see. But, yeah, that's it for the tier list.